All right, the horseweed that I mentioned, Conizus, the genus, mare's tail, whatever you call it, supposed to be a winter annual weed, but its clock is a little bit off now and it grows darn near all year long now. It's basically a no-till type problem. And we have lots of problems with it across basically the eastern half of the United States. North Carolina, about 1st of May, when we get into planting season, almost every other phone call I get is, well, I got horseweed, what do I do now? It's a management issue that we shouldn't have to deal with, but we've had a very hard time getting growers to deal with it. That's a thumbtack right there, and that's the seed off of horseweed. This thing will seed out for us about August, September, little old fuzzy light seed. They go everywhere. This was some work that was done taking little model airplanes and flying them around at different heights and seeing what you can catch. So whatever that is, 120 some meters or whatever up in the air, they were still catching horseweed seed. Well, when I got something that small, it doesn't weigh anything to start with, and it's way up in the air, where's it going? A long way. And so this thing spread like wildfire for us. It's a management issue. We need to deal with it in burn down. We're doing more and more no-till or some kind of reduced tillage. And what I tell our growers to deal with this weed, we got to have two parts of the burn down. Fleabane is, fleabane is very closely related. And we also have some resistant fleabane. So this is closely related to your fleabane. But we tell them you got to have two things in a program to burn it down. One of them, you got to kill what's up. If it's resistant to glyphosate, we've always liked glyphosate for our burn down programs, but if it's resistant to glyphosate, you got to use something else. And the second thing is you got to put something in there to give you some residual. And the reason for that, this is a calendar down here, so for us this is kind of the end of our summer season. That's when horseweed germinates. You get a big germination in the fall, cold weather in the wintertime, it pretty much quits, and then about planting time you can have another flush of germination. So if I do my burn down right in here, I may get some more come up. So we like to have something in there residual. What we have typically recommended has been glyphosate for all the other weeds, and then either dicamba or 2,4-D to kill the resistant ones. And for us, flumioxin or Valor is kind of our preferred residual material. Of course, there are waiting periods there, and that creates some issues for some people that, you know, it's been wet all winter, my dog was sick, whatever, they can't seem to get their burn downs on time. And then we got a lot of questions. Well, I put 2,4-D on, I believe it was 8 days ago. Is it two? How much longer do I have to wait? Those kinds of things. So there are waiting periods.
One question?
Yes, sir.
Do you know of any active ingredient that's been specifically developed to combat resistance? Or are we using things that...
We're using things that we already had. Now, there's been some things that have been moved into markets because of resistance. And a good example for us right now, for a couple of states at least, is the brake herbicide, the aquatic herbicide Sonar, Fluoridone.
Oh, right.
Fluoridone. C-Pro's aquatic products. We are, well, I don't want to get on my soapbox here, but we have brought it back in under Section 18s specifically to give us some different chemistry to handle resistance. So to answer your question, yeah, we're using things that we wouldn't use otherwise, but I don't know of a thing that somebody started out, their sole objective was, I'm going to develop it for resistance. Just to make the point here of this program works, untreated, Roundup, glyphosate only, and here's the programs that we're talking about. It works great. It's just simply a management thing, and we've had a hard time getting growers to do it. One other one that has worked very well for us, saflufenicil is the common name for BASF's product, seems to do a very good job on horseweed too. The problem with cotton is you really have to put it out a long ways ahead of planting. So again, that's a widespread problem, but it's one that we should be able to manage better than we're doing. The reason that we need to deal with it in burn down is because once the crop is up, we don't have a lot of options. In the case of cotton, if it's a cotton that we can put glufosinate, Liberty, Ignite, whatever y'all call it in Australia, that's about the only option we got in cotton. So we've got to get it burned down. This has been the game changer. This one has caused us to turn 180 degrees in where we've been. Palmer amaranth and amaranthus are pigweed species. Prior to Roundup Ready cotton coming on the market, and for us it was 1997, what were we doing to grow cotton? Pretty much across the country it was pretty much the same. We were in conventional tillage. We were working up the land, seed bed preparation. We were using all different kinds of herbicides. Regardless of where you were, there was a pre-plant like a trifluralin or a pendimethalin, some kind of a for us it may have been diuron or flumeturon. We were coming in with various things directed. The point is we had a lot of diversity in the weed management. We had a number of different modes of action, plus some non-chemical in there. A very diverse program. I guess y'all probably did the same thing. We adopted Roundup Ready cotton just as fast as we could get the seed, because it was so nice, so simple, so easy. I mean, even I could control weeds with Roundup, okay? So it was very quickly adapted. We quit doing these directed sprays, hooded sprays, just refused to do them anymore. I'm gonna spray it over the top. One of the things that on hindsight was a bad mistake for us. Roundup Ready allowed us to reduce or eliminate other herbicides. I can remember in the late 90s, a big thing that researchers were doing was basically documenting whether you do or do not need a pre-plant or a pre if you're gonna plant Roundup Ready cotton. And the bottom line was you really didn't need it. Timing was more critical if you didn't have a pre. So here's cotton that we had 2 shots of Roundup versus 1 delayed shot. We still controlled the weeds. Now obviously you see a difference in the growth of the cotton. The weeds were competitive, but we could still take them out. Roundup made sorry farmers good farmers, basically. And the bottom line was that with few exceptions, we did not really have to have soil applied herbicides in cotton. And we quit using them. And we quit using them because we didn't like to see injury on our cotton. We didn't like to see carryover. Roundup eliminated that. The other thing that came in, we were wanting to go to some kind of reduced or no-till. We were trying to go, but prior to Roundup Ready, the weeds more times than not would beat us. When Roundup Ready came, we saw a major shift to reduced tillage or no tillage. So we took out another weed control tool. We took some of the diversity out. So with Roundup Ready, here we are. We're in no-till or strip-till, no cultivation, no pre-plant incorporated herbicide. Most of us were putting out nothing pre. We weren't using anything post-emergence except glyphosate, so with multiple shots per year, little other chemistry. It worked. It worked great until it quit working. Again, on hindsight, I wish we could turn the clock back and change how we did things, but realistically, I don't think it would happen if we could turn the clock back. The Roundup Ready programs were so nice, so simple. Even if you could go out and tell our growers now, if you don't change 5 years from now, it ain't gonna work, they wouldn't change, I don't think. The other problem we got into, in terms of post-emergence things for broadleaf weeds and cotton, we basically had glyphosate and pyrethrobac, staple, Pyramax. That's all we had that we could really spray over the top for broadleaves. And the catch is we got resistance to both of them. and I'll show you some numbers. It's pretty widespread. When we found the glyphosate-resistant Palmer in 2005, again, you're sitting right here. Most of it was in this general area through here. 2010, it had covered all over the state, even got all over the coastal plain, and it really moved into the Piedmont area. Glyphosate resistant but still susceptible to ALS inhibitors, only 3% of those dots on the map. Resistant to ALS inhibitors but glyphosate would still work, only 2%. 95% of our pigweed now, and that's not every plant in the field, but 95% of our fields have plants that are resistant to both glyphosate and ALS inhibitors. And so that don't leave us a whole lot to deal with them post-emergence, with the exception of glufosinate. Fortunately, at this point, we do not have, or can't find resistance to PPO inhibitors. In the case of cotton, for example, we use a lot of famicefin pre-emergence. What's y'all's brand? Rumble. We're using a lot of it. The thing that scares us is not just cotton where we're using a lot of it, it's darn near every crop we grow we're using that chemistry. So we're scared of getting resistance. And also glufosinate, we don't have resistance. Now I think it's really out there. And
You think it is out there?
I think it is, but it's such a low level, it ain't popped up to be a problem. And I say that because when we were doing this whole statewide sampling, pulling seed, we found one plant. We had a little plot growing here, 5 or 6 plants in it. All of them died except one, and they didn't even touch him. We went back and screened every seed we had from that place, so thousands of seeds, and we never did hit another one.
But you hit one.
But there was one there, and I'm convinced it was resistant. You had a question?
I was just going to say, I talked to a grower, this is probably about a month ago now, and I was asking about his herbicide program in soybeans. And he told me he burned down with Vital and glyphosate. Then he came behind the press wheel with Envive and Parazone. Then he's come back over the top with Flexstar GT.
So he had 3 shots.
3 PPOs.
3 PPOs. We're using them in soybeans, peanuts, cotton, tobacco. We can use them in corn, but we don't use too much. Sweet potatoes, we're using them. Everywhere we're using them. And we're scared we're going to get resistance. The catch is we don't have a whole lot of alternatives to try to get growers on. Now, why?
Is that grower thought he was using multiple modes of action, right?
He was, and I asked him, I said, are you concerned that you're using 3 PPOs, and then, looking at what he's planting next year, he's using Reflex again.
Yeah.
And so, so we just kind of had that conversation about potential for PPO resistance.
We have been talking about that for the last couple of years to our growers, and we've generated a fair amount of awareness. The catch is I don't have real good alternatives. So you're in the case of your soybean guy, I don't want to overload the PPOs. Well, if he's got Palmer, what's he going to put out?
Well, we talked about using our product Tailwind, which would be metribuzin and metolachlor, with Parazone behind the press wheel, just to kind of interrupt the 2 PPOs.
Good if you're a brave man.
Well, we also talked about
Why do you have to be brave?
Well, we also
Injury.
talked about
Herbicide damage,
Injury.
the tolerant varieties. We discussed about
Yeah.
the soybean varieties that are more tolerant to metribuzin.
Yeah. The problem with metribuzin is this rate's just right, and a fraction more is too much. And we got a lot of variable soils, and so this end of the field is just right, and I go over that hill and I may kill soybeans. So.
But speaking of that, I think